Hey guys, welcome back to the Web Design Decal. Today we're going to go over how to use Figma. So once you've downloaded the file, you would go to your own, the main page of Figma in your account, and you go up to the top right-hand corner where it has this box with the arrow in it, and you hit import, and then you select the file, and then you should be able to follow along with this tutorial. So given that you've done all of that, let's go through some of the main functionality, because I know looking at this right now, it's kind of a lot. So let's get into it. And just as a precursor, all of the shortcuts and keyboard buttons that I am discussing are going to be for iOS or for Macs, and I will be posting an alternative version of it for people who use Windows. And in case you don't want to wait for that, command is pretty much the same thing as control. So just keep that in mind. So I guess the first main thing is to zoom in and out. If you have a trackpad, you can just move in and out using your fingers and the pitching, or you can hit Command plus to zoom in or Command minus to zoom out. So yeah, now we're gonna go to the top left where you can see all these different icons, and these are kind of the main tools that you're going to use. These three lines here are just kind of the general file things, and actually get to some other more advanced tools sometimes, but we don't have to worry about that much during this tutorial. The first and most important thing, the basic tool, which is the regular selection tool, which you would get to by pressing V if you're in the middle of using another tool. Basically, it lets you click on anything, move anything. That's pretty much what it does. This is just basically clicking. So then the next one from the left is this kind of box with the corners and the lines extended. So this is the frame tool, and you would hit F. And a frame is basically whatever you're designing for or designing on. So a phone, a tablet, paper, slides, that's generally what they're for. And there are already preset sizes over here on the right side that kind of give you a preset version. You just click on one of them and it'll create the frame for you. All frames are rectangular shapes, so you can't have any that have rounded corners. Just so you can under watch, all of these are actually just rectangular. They don't do the circular ones, as a heads up. So next from the left, you have the rectangle tool, which you get to by hitting R, and it's pretty straightforward. You just draw some rectangles. We'll go over that in a little bit. Similarly, you can either go to this drop-down menu, and you can see that there are other forms of shapes that are available. So if you want to have circles or ellipses, you would press O. And you can see that the check mark moved down from the rectangle to the ellipse. And since I don't actually want to draw a circle right now, I'd hit V for the regular selection tool. So next from the left, we have the pen tool, and you hit P. And this is a very versatile tool. It lets you do lines and also organic shapes. And it's a little bit more complicated and a lot more for graphic design related things, but we'll cover that later as well. And you don't need to worry about being super advanced using pen tool. So then probably one of the most important basic tools is text, which you get to by pressing T, and you just draw a text box and you type in it. As you can see below, we'll get practice with that as well. Then some other useful commands, there's Shift, which you can use in combination with other tools for straight edges, even shapes, and when used in combination with the regular selection tool, you can select more than one item. So if I select this thing, let's say I want to select all of the other text boxes in this column. So I'd hold down Shift, and then I can just click on each one. And you can see there's a little blue underline to show you what you're actually clicking on and what it encompasses. And they stay underlined after they've been selected. So what if I want to edit all of these at the same time? I'm just going to select everything else in the column like I said it would. Yeah, let's say I want to move all of this at the same time so I can make it align with the other column. Well, we can do this easily by grouping them together, and you would do that by hitting Command G. So now you can see over on the left in layers, which we will also talk about later, there all the individual labels for these text boxes have now condensed into group 14, and you can hit the arrow and then you can see them all together. And as you roll over it, each one will be highlighted. And I can move all of these together as a group, as you can see. And you can still edit ones specifically in the group by either clicking on it from the left, or if you double click within the group rather than single clicking. So now let's say, what if I no longer want to move everything in here as a group, and I don't want this to be grouped together like this anymore? Well, then I can hit Command Control G, and it ungroups. Or you can right click or 2-finger click if you have a trackpad, and go to ungroup. I believe this is actually Command Shift G. So as you can see, Shift is a super useful tool. Next on the list, it says creating a component. And we'll get some practice with this in a second as well, but basically creating a component means that you are creating assets that can be used many times within your same design. So you can do this with a particular color, a particular font style, so size, color, boldness, whatever. That can all be within a component. For example, you want to use a button multiple times on the same site. That's when you would create a component. And there are multiple ways of doing that besides this keyboard shortcut. Like you'll notice, actually, if I click on something, that there's this group of things in the top middle, and that allows you to, this shape that's 4 diamonds in the put together in the shape of a diamond, that also allows you to create a component of the thing that you have selected. Then Option Command bracket is how you move things to front or to back, therefore ordering things. This also comes up in the right click when you select something. Actually, pretty much everything in this column does. So that's super useful to remember. Use as mask, we will talk about at the end. But basically what it does is that on a shape that you have selected to use as mask, anything you put within that group above, quote unquote, the shape under the layers, you'll see later what I mean by this, it will be clipped within the original shape. And it's a very powerful tool. This also is represented by this kind of, oops. You can see that it's also in this top middle menu. This one is creating links, so if you want to link a website or have your links work within your design, you can do it there too. I'll talk about this one later. Flattening is a little bit more advanced, but essentially if you have more than one shape and you lay them on top of each other, you can flatten them so they all work together as a shape. It's kind of like a more intense version of grouping. So let's practice a bunch of these tools because I know I covered a bunch of stuff. So we want to create this text, so I'm going to hit T, and I'm going to make a box and say welcome to WDD exclamation point and highlight it. And then you can see over here on the right that there's a ton of different settings. You have the exact location X and Y of where it is. You have the width and height of the box, the angle that it's at, a bunch of good stuff. But what we're actually interested in is this small area that says text. So there are a number of ways that you can change the font. So you can either just click in here and then hit the arrow keys, and you see that the font changes with my arrow, up and down arrow clicks. You can also hit this and you can pick one. But also if you know exactly what you're looking for, you can just type it in. You can change the line weight as well of your text and change the size with arrows as well. But yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. To explore some of the other settings, I'm just going to copy paste this so I don't have to retype it. And let's say I put it here. You can see that there are a number of different settings. I can put it at different alignments within the box that it's in and which way it's adjusted to. So we're going to experiment with line height, which is basically the spacing in between lines. And you can also use the arrow keys for this, and you can see it's getting larger slowly, but we're just going to go to 200% for double spacing. Now this other one that has lines on either side of it vertically, or vertical lines on either side of it horizontally, that represents how much space is in between each letter. So if I do 100%, you can see all of the letters are now super far away from each other. And then 0% is standard. But let's say that I want these two things aligned together. So I can select them by dragging like I just did, or I could have done the shift method. But on the top right-hand corner, there's a bunch of these different options, and each one of them has two different lines that show examples of two objects, and it shows the line that's shown perpendicular to them shows which direction it's going to be aligned to. For example, this line that goes in the middle will be like aligning their horizontal centers, whereas like this. And the line over here, which is the one that we want, will align them left. And whichever item you select first, so since I had selected this one first, the objects aligned together to the left side of this object. But if I undo that, we can do left align and they snap this way. Okay, so that's how you do text. So now let's get a little bit more practice doing shapes. So if you hit R, we can make the rectangle, but automatically it fills it in with this gray and it doesn't have the outline that we want. So you can just hit minus and now it's transparent, and then plus on stroke. Again, these are on the right side. And now we just have a basic rectangle with that outline that we want. And there are tons of different settings for it. We'll get into it more with pen tool, but you can change the thickness, you can change where the lining goes within the shape, and that's not too important. So now to make the second shape, I'm going to copy paste this rectangle, and when I roll over it while having it selected, there are these circles in the corners, and if you pull on them, they give you radius to the corners, essentially rounding them. So at their max roundedness, it kind of becomes like there are two circles that have been connected with the rectangle. And you can get this like pretty standard Spotify button shape. So now we can apply that to make this button that's on the side. So we're going to make a smaller rectangle, and I'm going to zoom in and then pull it. So now we have the Spotify button shape, and I'm going to go into fill and click on where it has the hex code and like a small square of the color. And there are a bunch more settings on doing colors, but all I'm going to do for right now is use this kind of eyedropper tool and select this color. So now you have it. There's also a super helpful thing that Figma does where at the bottom of this, it shows this menu of like every color that's been used on the page, and you can select those instead. So now we want it to say explore. And I want it to be white. It's centered. So now I'm going to move it so you can see these red lines are showing up to show me where I should put it, and it's showing me that this is centered on the page. Or within the button. So now I'm going to copy paste this button that I just made. I know it's not the same as these exactly, but it's the same idea. I'm going to select this button, and I'm going to go down to the bottom right where it says effects and hit the plus sign, and it'll automatically give a drop shadow. And now you have that more three-dimensional effect. I'm going to make all of this a little bit smaller so I have space to do the other stuff. So yeah, now we're going to make an ellipse. Like it's shown here, you just click and drag the same way that I did with the rectangles. If you just click while hitting O, you just get a circle of size 100, 100. If you do that with rectangle, you get a square of size 100 to 100. But you don't always want your circle to be that size. So I'm going to show you how else you can make a circle. So you hit O, and then you hold down Shift, and then you click and drag the same way. And as you can see, the dimensions of it are constricted so that you're only drawing a circle. So I'm going to make it about this size, and I'm going to put it there to be centered with the other ones, and I'm going to fill it as the same color. So now how do we get this little Pac-Man face that I have going over here? Well, I'm going to copy paste this circle, and you saw the grid lines that help me keep it exactly aligned with the previous circle that I made. And when you roll over it, similarly to how we did this on the rectangle, there's a circle, and then this time it makes an arc. And now you have a little Pac-Man face. But there's still more you can do. And this is when that other feature in the top middle menu I mentioned comes into play. So there are a couple of options. So as you can see after I clicked on it, that now there are different circles that are showing. And these change the angle of how far you set the Pac-Man little mouth bits, I guess. And then you still have, and then you have a middle one. But if you double click on any shape, you can edit them as if you're using the pen tool. So I can like drag this around, and you can see it clips interestingly, and it's such a cool thing to play with. But say you want to make one of those weird pie charts that the Apple Watch uses to track your movement. So you can select the middle of the circle and just delete it. And now you just have the outside, although it's not filled in because we need to select stroke. and I'm going to set it to 6. And then we have these settings. So I want to put the round edge because that's what's in the Apple thing. And I'm going to change it arbitrarily to the same green we had before. So yeah, you can see a similar way to get that other than double clicking is that in the top middle menu, you have this box with circles on the ends, and that's how it's also how you can edit object. And you can hit done or hit enter. But yeah, to make it look more like the Apple thing, I think you're sort of starting to see what I mean by this. And I'll pick this color. You can also see as I'm scaling things down that I'm holding shift actually to make sure that the size stays the same, because if I just change it, you can see that the size and shape of it is being warped. And then I can make this the same color. So now you have the Apple Watch thing as well. So yeah, let's move on to the pen tool. And I know there's a polygon tool that you saw before, but we're going to make this using the pen tool. So you just click once and let go for one point, and then you do that again for another point. And you have all these red guidelines to show you that it's perfectly aligned or where to put it. So there, now we have a right isosceles, well, maybe not isosceles, but a right triangle. And you can go to stroke, change it to 3 or 4, and then we can pick which corners we want. This is kind of rounded, and change it to green. We can also make rhombuses in a similar fashion. And then as long as the shape is closed with whatever you make with pen tool, you can add a fill to it. So we can get rid of the stroke and give it the yellow fill and hit done. So this is super advanced, but this is basically to show that you can have organic shapes and it's totally fine. You don't have to do this for the assignment. But yeah, basically, if you hit P, and then you hold down when you're making a new point, you will get these 2 other lines that show up, and you can basically create angles and curved lines. And this is how you make really interesting organic shapes. You might recognize this from Photoshop or other graphic design tools. Yeah, so now that we're done with that, we're going to move on to components and assets. So let's say I want to use this particular red throughout my website. But I don't want to keep going through the documents or using the eyedropper tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, and you see under fill on the right hand side that there are these 4 dots, and you don't want to hit the plus sign, which I know is tempting because you would think, oh, that adds it to your styles. No, that actually adds a color to the circle, which that looks kind of cool, but that's not what you're going for right now. What you really want is to hit these 4 dots, and then you have a list of the current color styles, which I have, and you can have color styles that go across all of your documents as well, which is what that is, but you can ignore that. Yeah, now you want to hit the plus style, and that's create style. And I'm going to call this persimmon. And now you have it. If you want to have this color not be attached to the style and get changed with this style, because if I were to go, well, I'll show you in a second. See, when I unselect it, I have all the color styles. I can edit this color and it will change anything of this color already. to whatever new color is bound to persimmon, which is super useful when you're changing stuff. But maybe you just want to change this instance of it. So instead of hitting the minus sign, you want to hit detach style. And then it's still the same color, but it's not attached to the other things of that color. But I'm going to reattach it. So then this button, hang on. Anyways, we're going to make this button a component. So what you would do, if I hadn't already made this a component, I'm going to do it on the circle, is you select the object that you want to create as a component, and you see this middle button that I was talking about earlier, and you can make it into a component so then anything that you copy paste from it is now an instance of the original. And you can see over here on the left that the original one has a similar shape to the create component icon, whereas the instances are kind of just an empty diamond. And every time, kind of similar to the color, it changes when you change the original. But I don't want this to be a component, so yeah. So now we want to do something similar with this text. So we're going to select the text, and we want to be able to type using it, but we don't want this specifically to be a component because we don't want all of our apps and our website to say yare yare. We just want it to be in the same size and font. So under text, there is another similar 4 dots, and you do it the same way. And I'm going to call this JoJo's after the anime I took that from, and create style. And then you can edit it in a similar way and detach it if you need to. All pretty straightforward. So now that we've gone over these basics, excuse me, we're going to create a high fidelity mockup based on this resort website from Critical Role that I made. So I already went through the process of doing low fidelity, mid fidelity, and high fidelity. I have credited important people here, and all of these photos over here are from Unsplash, and I created this one from scratch. So these are all free to use, basically. Except please don't take credit for this illustration. I worked pretty hard on it. But yeah, I'm going to go through just kind of the beginning steps of how you can do this on your own. So we're going to use the selection tool and select everything that's on this, but not the frame itself. And then we're going to copy, and then we're going to click on the title of the frame that we want to paste it to, so we can put it in exactly the same position where it was on the mid fidelity. And now we have it there. But I don't want this rectangle, so I'm going to get rid of it. And now it's pretty standard. It's looking kind of like what we had before. I'm going to drag this in just with selection tool, and you can see that I have a bunch of guides, and I'm looking for those 2 red X's in the corner in the center line to show me that I have put it in the correct place. It's easier to do when zoomed in, and then I'm going to send this illustration to back. So I can have everything appear above it. So you might think, oh wow, this looks pretty close to done, but there are a couple extra details. If you look at this high fidelity that I made, this text is actually in the same blue as the background, and the E and the C are slightly clipped by this volcano. And here's where we're going to talk about layers, because how else would you achieve putting the text somehow in front of and yet behind the illustration? So this illustration is actually a group of many pen tool shapes, as you can see by me rolling over this. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag this text rumble cusp to right below the volcano. And now you can see that the layers on the side represent the order in which everything is on the page. And it can help you keep track of where everything is and how to find them. This is also why assets and groups are super useful. It's like you don't want your whole, like this is such, it's very cluttered, right? It can be hard to keep track of everything. So, really grouping and knowing how to use layers to your advantage is a really great skill to have. So this is looking messy, but we'll clean it up later. And I'll show you that. So now we're going to select all of these and we're going to change the fill by going to document colors and by clicking local colors and then hitting this color that I have pre-saved called dark. That's another way to pick something from a color style. Then we can select this and either go through the way I just showed or hit the 4 dots and hit dark. And now it's correct. Then to change the background of the frame itself, we're going to click the name High Fidelity, and then we can go to fill the 4 dots and hit dark. And now it's the color we want it to be. So now we want to select the headings, and we're going to use the shift addition to the selection tool to select them. And I'm going to use the 4 dots. You kind of know the drill by now. I'm going to do that for the rest of the text as well. So now we're going to make these cards. I'm only going to go through one of them because you guys can do this on your own. And it would just be kind of boring for me to do this redundantly. But I'm just going to go through it. So I'm typing the name, I use T. Now I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to pick the font that it was, put it bold. I'm going to really quickly check what size I put it at. Looks like it was 20. I think I set it as subheading. There, very nice. And I'm going to put it at the bottom, kind of like I did before. And going to put it as white like it was. Then I'm going to draw the other text box, see really quickly what it said, which is a luxurious place to call home. So but I don't want it to be in this style, so I'm gonna click outside of it, detach, and then put p text or subtext, I think is the correct one. Align it using the red grid lines. That's probably good. Select the fill to light. And then last thing is to make this vertical line with 3, the yellow color. I'm actually going to do it this way because it's good practice. And now we have a couple of things. So I'm going to select everything in this section and group it. And I'm going to rename this for my reference. And you saw that it was basically just double clicking the name, and that's how you spell it or rename it. And the icon for a group is this box with dashed lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over the image that goes for it, which is currently unavailable. So I'm going to pull it over for my use right now. And I'm going to drag it on here. And, well, this doesn't look very nice, does it? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it into this group. And I dragged it underneath the text and the line so you can see above it now. But what I'm going to do is the whole reason why we copy pasted from Fidelity. I'm going to two finger or right click on the rectangle. You could have also done it from this page. There's no real rhyme or reason why I put the image on top of it like that. And you're going to go to use as mask or hit this little circle thing that looks like the moon up there. But I'm going to just do it from here. And you can see now that the image has been clipped in the shape and dimensions of that rectangle. And oops. And if I click on the image, I can move it to this spot where we want it for this image. So now we're almost done with this. We got the image, we got the text, we got the fancy yellow line. Now we got to add the filter that kind of makes all these images cohesive on the page. And we're going to use one of my favorite shortcuts, which is we're going to draw a rectangle and have the little red X's show up to show that we have lined it up with each corner. And then I am going to make it feel dark. And at first, it blocks everything, but I'm going to put it at about 60% opacity, which controls how transparent it is. And I'm going to drag the rectangle above the image. So it's between the text and the image. I'm going to actually bring it down to 50. So you can see the image a little bit better. And then very last thing is I'm going to select the group, scroll down on the right side to effects, and add the drop shadow. And now you have a card, and you can do it with all of the rest of the things on here using the images over here at hand. And there you pretty much have it. So in order to submit, so that you don't just copy the existing high fidelity example that I have, there are a couple things you need to do. So first, we need to go into the illustration, go through the different layers, and you'd see this one called back color. And currently it's this lovely purple shade, but to submit, we would like you to pick some shade of green. And I think this is a pretty good one. And as you can see, it gives a whole new vibe to this image, and clearly it's different. So then once you've finished with that, what we'd like you to do is to click on the name of the frame, and hopefully everything that you've done has stayed within the frame. You can check again by rolling through everything that's in here. It'll outline it on the page, and you can check to see that everything that you had is in there. Also, if you had everything labeled, it should easily be seen whether or not you have everything on it. And then once you have that selected, you can scroll down on the right side and it'll say export, and you hit the plus sign, and you want to export it as a PNG and drop that into your lab assignment the normal way. Another thing that we ask you to submit is the link. So instead of adding your Figma file back into your submission, we would like you to take out any Figma files that are in there because they're too large to be submitted. If you are trying to submit and you are having problems, it is likely due to the fact that you are trying to submit a Figma file and it is just too large. So instead, what we want you to do is to share a link with us so we can see that you have done all the different parts of this. And how you do that is you can hit the share button and you can copy a link. So, because it's automatically on anyone with the link can view. So if it's not, you can change it. It's pretty straightforward, I think. But yeah, that is pretty much the Figma tutorial. If you want additional functionality, um, you can find plugins and browse those from the home page or like the way I just showed you just now. Additionally, if you want to look up all the different components you have for this page and your assets, it'll show in this little assets tab. And one last thing is that you can have more than one page in your Figma file. So currently we're on the only page of this Figma file, but you can add more and it'll just open a new workspace. And that's pretty much the basics of it. And yeah, good luck.